Let's get started here. So, hi, for those that don't know me. I think I know everybody on this call pretty. No, there's one or two I don't. I'm Scott Jackson. I'm the executive director of Shakespeare Notre Dame. I'm a founder of this conference, the Shakespeare Prisons Conference, along with Kurt Toffland, who is to my left. And the first thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional homeland of the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomis, as well as the Miami, Peoria, and Kickapoo. And I am on the shores of the Sakawissippi, which is now known as the St. Joseph River. And I invite you all to share a land acknowledgement in the chat if you're so inclined. And a huge welcome to Stephan Wolfert and Dawn Stern, who will be joining us later in the chat as well. And thank you all for joining us here on this Friday afternoon too. So the way we do this, we listen. Kurt Toffland is going to moderate this chat, but we're going to be asking questions the whole time. So please feel free to, as questions come to you, to just put them into the chat as you'd like. And I'll be sending some links and things through there at the same time too, but don't be shy. And we like to call people into the space to ask their questions directly. If you prefer not to do that, just type in the chat, no, or something. Just we'll give you that option. And we'd also like to preface the conversation with just letting you know, just there's some triggering elements to this conversation today. So definitely know that we'll be talking about violence, sexual trauma, et cetera, et cetera. So please, just be aware of that as we go into the conversation. I now will hand this over to my very capable co-founder of this whole endeavor, Kurt Toffland. Take it away, Kurt.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everyone. So happy to see you. I hope most of you, if not all of you, were able to see Stephan's show. I'm so happy to have Stephan here. He's a pioneer. He bushwhacks through the wilderness. There are so many things that he is, and besides being a good friend and colleague and mentor and all of those things too. So Stephan, first, thank you for your service. Appreciate you. And then your service goes on, doesn't it? Your service goes on and on and on, because now you're serving the vets. And the vets is a very, very, I think, front and center issue for all of us that are working in corrections, because there are so many vets that end up in prison. When I started in the 90s, that's where I ran into the vets, was the Vietnam vets in prison. I'm a product of that age and generation. My draft number was 29. I was under a school deferment, and about 3 months before my deferment was going to be up, meaning I was graduating from college, and they stopped drafting. So I miraculously sidestepped that, because I didn't know really what I was going to do. Probably go to Canada or maybe go to prison. I didn't know. I wasn't serving in that war because I marched and was very involved in that time period. And so the vets are and can still continue to be an ongoing population for me that I get very angry about how they're treated when they come back. And Stephan addresses that in his one-man show. So I'm going to kick it off, and if you have questions, please put them into the chat room and we'll get to them. Otherwise, I can sit here and talk to Stephan for hours, so it'll just go on. It will drone on and on. So Stephan, part of this conference, and a big question we're asking in this conference, is why Shakespeare? So let's kick it off with why Shakespeare.
This will take the hour. Obviously, for on this group, we all know that he writes about the human experience perfectly, period. So I'm going to take several tracks into it and wrangle me at any point. That's for anyone. If you're like, hey, so speak more about that or less about that. But besides writing about the human experience, if we look at the data of who's joining the military, myself included, we know through Harvard studies and the Department of Defense's own study, and as well as our own, that those of us who join the military come from higher ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences. So we're children who survive traumatic environments, attachment disorder, you name it, more adverse childhood experiences than the average person, and the military is attractive to us. Therefore, we're survivors of trauma. Well, Shakespeare's plays are about trauma. Even the romances don't have, I mean, look at Twelfth Night. And look how Malvolio is treated. We always kind of throw it aside, but look at the relationships in there. Then when we go into, let's say, the ones that are about the military, whether it's the Henriade or even Hamlet, when they're not actively at war, you have people addressing who they, in Hamlet in particular, to be or not to be is not just about, should I kill myself or not? It's, should I be who I feel I really am or who everyone thinks I am? That's who's joining the military. That's why the commercials worked on me. It said, be all you can be, because my era was from that. What a great place to get a start on your life and your career. Flee your hometown, flee your family, come see us. So Shakespeare got this. And then just historically, they were in two, when Shakespeare's writing his greatest plays, they were in two wars. One in Ireland, it was a 9 years war. It was largely unconventional warfare. Vietnam, Afghanistan, which is now twice 9 years. They were in an on-again, off-again war with Spain, conventional warfare, Cold War, or so-called Cold Warfare. So they were on, he saw this happening. He was surrounded by veterans. We know this because he's writing them so perfectly. Lady Percy's speech to her husband in Henry IV, Part 1, is the best description of post-traumatic stress disorder in the English language, period. And it was written 400 years before the diagnostic manual describing post-traumatic stress disorder. She asks him a series of questions that perfectly describe it. Why don't you sleep? Why, when you do sleep, do you have night terrors? Why do you have a 1,000-yard stare? Why don't you eat? Why don't we have sex? Why are you angry all the time? Why are you, when you're not angry, why are you just dissociated? And Jonathan Shea, in his book, Achilles in Vietnam, takes Lady Percy's speech, and next to each question she asks her husband, he lists the symptoms out of the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual Describing Post-Traumatic Stress. That's how accurate he got our experiences. And then on top of it, when you look at the verse, I'll put his name in here, Strozier, who was a psychiatrist who does research, worked with 9/11 survivors, among many others. But Strozier has a paper in 2005 that shows how people who are processing their trauma speak in blank verse. We actually speak in iambic pentameter most of the time when we are when we are speaking about things we haven't processed. Before it's become a story of, so I went down to the basement, it was really dark. And when we've processed it, it becomes a prose story, if you will. But when we're describing something we've not yet processed, boom, it comes out in broken language or verse. Shakespeare did that. So the reason we use Shakespeare is A, he provides the language that we may already lack or we may lack for our experience. And B, he provides the form in which we can talk about our experience, have our emotions fully, not hide them, not put them aside, fully experience them, then recover, because we have to go on to the very next line that elicits emotion. So we're breathing in before each new line of Shakespeare's verse, just like most of the classical actor training that we have, whether it's Shakespeare and Company, where I met Tina, or whomever else is teaching this. Breathe in before each new line of verse. That's not just a way to do Shakespeare. It's a way to keep your limbic system at bay. It's a way to keep the fight or flight system offline. It's a way to keep the parts of your brain that Bessel van der Kolk will talk about when you have him on, keep the parts of your area online, parts of your brain rather online, that are needed to process our trauma. Broca's area for language. Wernicke's region, the medial prefrontal cortex, by looking at the audience, as Shakespeare's characters did. They came out, his actors looked at the audience, which was a room full of strangers, and asked them deep personal questions. That's the perfect description of the best models of group therapy that I've ever heard. And then when I worked with the Native American theater companies since 2000, this is what they're doing in their circles. It's just, we're in a circle. It's not a hierarchical model. I'm not in charge. I'm just sharing my experience with you. And Shakespeare did his plays in what? The globe. It was in the round, in a circle. Yes. And I see Jojo going, this. So we're all around. We're in a circle already and sharing. So he provides our language. He provides the rhythm in which to speak it and process it. And he provides the format, just like EMDR, where you look at people and it helps reassign in your brain that memory from an experience into a memory. Takes that traumatic experience and starts to move it to a different part of the brain. Shakespeare provided that model 400 years ago. So that's why. I could go on, but hopefully that gets a start as to why I use this brilliant guy's writing.
It does. And I love how, this is true of your work, that you are combining science with art. So you work with NYU and Beck and Bessel and stuff, which is beautiful, because we're not scientists, and we need those professionals to work with us to help. I think we mostly me, I'll speak in the I just followed instinct. I just followed instinct in doing the work. So you're a survivor of trauma, childhood trauma. And as you said earlier, a lot of what draws people to the military are those folks that are survivors of trauma, and then in the military, as you share in your show, you have another trauma, at least one big, huge one, which is the death of Marcus, your best friend. Did you find that when you're so articulate about your trauma, you have your own language for your trauma? Those of us that work oftentimes with people in prison, they don't have language for their trauma. And so for me, I use Shakespeare to help them find the language for it, and then to find their own language. So has that been true of you? Is that you find a speech of Shakespeare's and all of a sudden it gives language to what it is that you experience that you didn't have language for? Does that happen for you?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, and for the rooms that we're in, anyone that we're working with, because it started with just veterans, because I am one, but then we move in addiction. We work in addiction centers. We work, lightly, especially in comparison to you, to the incarcerated populations, and now we're moving more into the general population as well. But yeah, that absolutely. Acting is the first form of psychology. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the way we develop a character, inside out or outside in, right? Meaning that, I'll pick Richard III because I talked about it in the show. Richard resonated deeply within me. So when I perform him, I'm not worrying about the physicality. But then let's say someone doesn't connect with them deeply, we put them in a physical form and something begins to happen. And then when we put them in a less abled position than their body might be, a restrictive, emotions come up, memories come up. So developing a character works the same way that healing from trauma does. Sometimes it's inside out, and sometimes it's outside in. And if you're wondering if that's true, think of the way trauma manifests. We're triggered sometimes by external experiences or internal experiences. It might be an external experience of a smell, a noise, the way the light is on that particular day, conjures up an immediate experience. This is why Bessel talks about in his book that trauma is an experience. It's not a memory yet, it's an experience. I smell diesel exhaust, physical response from head to toe, inside and out. So if I want that for acting, then I can bring that into that work. And what I found by working on Cry Havoc is by doing that, it helped me process it. It helped my body experience that and realize, but in a theater environment, instead of on the subway, we'll say a loud noise and there isn't a place for me to process it, but instead I'm in a community, I'm in a group therapy model known as theater, where I can have that experience, survive it, my body trusts me, my body comes back down from it, comes back, and now that experience is less likely to hijack me as greatly as it did the first time, and each time it gets better. So my brain fractured in about 4 different responses, so wrangle me in, Kurt, if I'm not. But
well, can I connect that
Yeah.
just with my question is, you're a survivor of trauma.
Yeah.
You made a show then
Yeah.
about the trauma that you had experienced. And was that helpful for you? And how is it for you to relive the trauma? Because every time you do your show, you're back into being in the basement with your father coming down and asking what you're doing, and you tell him ballet and he beats you. You know, tell me how that is for you, because trauma, mostly people run from the trauma. You run towards it. You embrace it. And
I don't know that everyone runs from it. Thank you. Everyone's what it does is it puts us out of regulation. It puts us, either we want to run from it or we run towards it. This is true. And again, I keep getting off, but I swear I'll come back and answer it. But case in point to what you said, another study, I forget who did the study at the moment. There were multiple, but they were studying mothers who were pregnant and widowed by 9/11. What they did was they studied the newborn's amygdalas, which is our emotional, that little almond shaped mechanism in our brain that helps regulate our emotions. And they found that these children who were gestated and born and raised in crisis, right? So 9/11, their mother was widowed by this. This is crisis. They're sharing their mother's bloodstream, the hormones of crisis, whether it be cortisol, what have you. And what they found was, by and large, these infants had smaller than typical amygdalas. However, they operated more efficiently in crisis. They actually needed crisis to be almost, dare I say, in their comfort zone, if I can phrase it that way for our purposes, meaning that if they weren't in crisis, they were out of regulation. We see this when they did the studies with folks in yoga. Now, yoga long-term is great, but you take someone right out of combat and put them in a yoga class who's never been in it, their brain is in crisis. They're in the most calm, sedate setting they could possibly be, but it's so foreign that to anyone else, it's like, how could you be upset? Well, because the brain is used to being in a combat zone or in a crisis in the case of these infants. So that's why I say it's less about knowing what each person's reaction is going to be, and just knowing that we go out of regulation. We might, we ask, why do people go back to their abusers, myself included? Because it's familiar. It's known. I know how to operate in that. It's an environment, I grew up in that. So I know, just go right back to, I think of myself as a piece of shit. So why shouldn't I be treated like a piece of shit? Right. So that's what we're going, that's why we go back to that. So to your point though, because I'm all over the place. You had said, what was your question? I've had a little too much coffee.
I forgot what my question was.
Scott, what was his question? I wanted to answer it. I'm sorry, everyone.
No, anything that you say or share is wonderful, and
okay,
sometimes.
Sometimes.
So, this beautiful gesture that you do physically, it's beautiful when Marcus is wounded. I can't describe it in any other way, but it's a beautiful gesture because it's so full, it's so human, it's so tender. It could be you holding a baby. There could be so many things. And you do it throughout the play. It recurs and recurs. You don't even have to tell people what it is. The moment that you do it, we know exactly where you are. Where did that come from? Where did that gesture come from? Did a director give you that, or
yeah. It's a great question, and not only did I remember your other one, but there's several others in the chat here. So I'll do my best to be a little bit more, as Polonius says, brief. The gesture was a muscle memory. It was just muscle memory for me. So on the few occasions before I created Cry Havoc, on the few occasions that I had shared the story, like with my wife Dawn, I'm pointing that way because she's in the next room in our temporary housing here. Whenever I said it, I talked about it, and that was, as I said earlier, and to borrow a phrase, indelible in my hippocampus, that of all the experiences I had with him, my memory, my most profound, deep, visceral, and muscle memory of him is that of grabbing his head. Trigger warning, I'm going to be a little bit graphic about it, not for the intent other than you can understand my experience for it. What used to be in the show, and we pared it down, it was the gesture and me attempting to describe everything I experienced. Because he was, again, trigger warning, I apologize, because he was hit in the head with what was actually like a piece of the bullet, because they were so big that if the whole bullet had hit him, it may have even been a piece of metal from molten metal from the track, we don't know, but it pierced at such a velocity that I had cerebral spinal fluid in my nose, in my mouth, in my eyes. I could feel it on my skin. It was a sensation, a full sensation that not only took days and days and days to just not be experiencing every single moment, but as soon as I grab his head, as soon as I make that gesture, it's there. I feel it fully. Again, this is what Bessel's writing about of it's an experience. Trauma is an experience, not a story. So when I did that and was telling that story, as I shared it, as we were attempting to put it into Cry Havoc, let's actually just take a moment to breathe as I shared that, because I saw Tina, thank you, letting me know that was a lot to dump on you all. And so take a breath if you need, make contact with yourself as I share this. I'm done with that description. Just know that as well. Let your body know that. But when we began putting it on stage, the gesture was there. And then, as happens with acting and theater, just like in real life, we began sterilizing, and I stopped doing it. And it was Dawn. This was really although there's a director listed, this was a community piece, a piece built by community through people sharing their stories and us building and people going, hey, that landed for me. So that's how we expanded certain parts of the play and whittled away others. And that was one of them. That gesture was, hey, make sure you bring that back. And what we know with both group therapy and theater is that once something's introduced to the room, we can use a shorthand. Now the mere gesture of that, because I shared it, when I make that gesture, we all experience it. It's more, the gesture is actually more powerful than my description. The same thing is true from the very top of the play. I open the play with Montana, midnight. The reason is because when I say Montana, everyone has an experience. Everyone has either an imagined, immediately your imagination fills in the blanks, or you have an actual experience. And then I say midnight. So you're all having a visceral experience that's far more powerful than me saying, okay, so Montana, I'm on the western side, it's the mountains, there's a crag there. The more I describe it, the more I rob you of your own experience. So instead, we use the true power of theater, the true power of group therapy, which is, I trust that you have an imagination. I trust that you have experiences. I trust that you came here to turn on your mirror neurons. I trust that you're going to take care of yourself as I stand in front of you and say, I'm not okay. I'm okay with not being okay, but I'm going to be not okay for a little while and trust that you can take care of yourself and trust that I'm going to take care of myself and do indicators along those lines. So that way, when I do the gesture, you know that I may be there, but I'm also here with you at the same time. And that lets you know I'm okay. And then later when I bring it up, we all have that community of experience of, Yeah, Marcus. And everyone has their own version of Marcus, their own experiences. Because the last thing I'll say about what we know about trauma is that it's not an incident. It's not limited to an incident can unleash it, but it's an environment, it's an experience. And that's why the embodiment is so important to it. There were a couple of...
Tom Weaver, you want to step in, ask your question?
Yeah. So first of all, hi, Stephan. I want to say I got to see Cry Havoc when you performed it in Prague and at the STA conference. And your session at that STA conference is legit something that I think about every day. And it was a very, it changed me as an artist. It changed me as a person. So thank you for that all that time ago. My question was about Cry Havoc itself. How has the content in the story changed or evolved since you first started performing it? And if so, in what way?
In almost every way for the first 3 years. When I first did the show, it was, I'd rented a theater for 2 weeks and invited theater makers that I love and respect and not for real, on purpose. Some that like, just, you know what I mean? Because I wanted to hear everything, excuse me, right up front. And I didn't have a script. I'm not the type of writer that can sit down and write a script. When I do, I try to be clever and I try to be smart and all these things that I respect of other writers. But but where I am is more this of let's talk, let's have a conversation, let me whittle it down. Let's talk more, so I hours and hours of material that I tried to pare down. I had 25, I think it was 25 monologues, performance ready. Ones that all along since 96 or even earlier, 93 had stuck out to me as me experiencing them differently than non-veterans, whether it was in grad school or in production since. Or as Kurt mentioned earlier, spoke better to my experience than I could ever possibly put into words. So I took those and I got in front of an audience and I just started talking and sharing about, there were stories I knew I wanted to share, but I hadn't written them out. And there were several that I had told so many times as sort of that war story that I told at the bar that are, that had gotten to the point of like, hey, tell that one again. You know what I mean? There were a few of those that were like the anchors and, but I got in front of the audience and let that terror be, you know what I mean? But the terror of like not knowing what I'm going to say, that there are those moments when we forget our lines on stage. What would it be like to live there? What would it be like to be in front of an audience and just have that be the community for them to know as well, for the audience to know that I'm making this up as we go. So it took about a year and a half to craft that into a cogent piece. So at night, Dawn and I would have, we'd have cards out on the floor, those index cards that were like, well, this story maybe would be better behind that story. And this Shakespeare piece serves better to that. And I don't think we need those 3 stories and maybe bring this more in. And so we had a really solid story, but it wasn't until Tina Packer came in and said, it's a really interesting piece, but where are you in it? What I realized was for nearly 35, 40 minutes, I talked about the problem, but there was no me. Because I had, for many, many reasons, avoidance, also low self-worth, to feel like, well, who gives a shit about me? I don't, all of the fear, you name it. Go down your checklist, and I'm sure they were one of the reasons. So Tina really forced me to, that first 15 minutes you see at the beginning, that's really Tina Packer saying, I want to know about you. And where I met Tina as well. I'm here. It was at Shakespeare and Company where they asked some of the prompts. Dennis Krosnick's prompt of the landscape of my childhood. that became a component in Cry Havoc from that point forward. Of the landscape of my childhood was pouring my dad's booze for him. So as I brought more of this stuff of me into the show, the more it landed with audiences, the greater response I got from people, both, I don't want to say positive and negative, but you know, I had vets that would come up afterwards and I swore they were going to hit me because they were so worked up. They were so upset because so much stuff had been conjured up in them. And it's not just my story, it's Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare's vowels and consonants. That's what I got off track earlier. Kurt was saying that sometimes it's not even Shakespeare's actual intellectual language. It's the way he strings sounds together that they pulled shit out of me. And so that I know that when I would give my body over to it in front of an audience, I would see other people have a reaction. And in some cases, the vets would come up and they wouldn't know what was, they didn't know they were even that upset. Some of them even said, I didn't know I wanted to hit you until I was standing in front of you. Some said, I didn't want to hit you. I wanted to hug you, but I don't know how to deal with human, that kind of contact. So any number of things. And so that helped me get braver as an actor on stage, to share more deep, dark secrets that I hadn't shared. That story about at the Wolfgang Puck, the kids catering event, that wasn't in there. That was shared the night of the Newtown massacre. The night that happened, I was so deeply affected that I couldn't go on. They held curtain. I shared why. And my wife said, you have to put that on stage. The director said, you have to put that on stage. The lighting designer, I had these people that I trusted said, you must put that on stage. There was no way. And at the moment I was doing it, I remember having a full-on anxiety attack, a full-on PTSD attack, just trembling, not able to breathe, and started telling people the story. But doing following Shakespeare's ritual of grounding and breathing and making eye contact, grounding, breathing, making eye contact, grounding and breathing, and seeing people breathing, seeing people taking care of themselves, seeing people that could handle what I was sharing. Maybe they hated me, I don't know, but it's not my business what they think or feel. It's my business to share honestly, and then to get their feedback that those are the most powerful moments in the piece. That then habits are created through reward and reinforcement. So by being rewarded and having it reinforced, the more honest I was, the more people enjoyed the piece. I won't say forced me, encouraged me, invited me to be more bold in the way I shared things. That what's not in the film is I dance at the end of the piece. I do a full ballet. Wasn't my choice to edit it out, by the way. I was overruled. I wanted it in there, but the editor cut it. But at the play, I can't tell you, it took me probably a year and a half to do it consistently every night after the show, to just do the dance to a song, because I'm terrified to do so. But the reason I ended up, once I finally did it, what kept me doing it every single night was a few veterans saying, I'm terrified to dance. I'm terrified to move in front of others. And the fact that you did that makes me interested in trying to, they actually shared, one of the vets said, I now, for the first time, am calling myself a veteran. And for the first time, I'm acknowledging that I might have PTSD. Because when you did that, I couldn't comprehend actually doing that in front of other people. So that's how I crafted, that's how we chose to do this. And after a certain point, about a year and a half, almost 2 years, we said, okay, this is the play. It's got to stay there. No more additions, no more editing. Just let's keep it and then make a next piece. Let that be as it is. But it took a solid 2 years to get to that place. Did that answer your question, Thomas? Yeah, good.
Sheila Kavanaugh, would you like to step in, ask your question about Bessel?
Yeah. Hopefully I've got a really bad internet connection, but hello, Stephan, and hello, Don. I took one of Bessel's workshops in September. It was a week long, and used a lot of his work when I was working with the Shakespeare in prison programs in India.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that I found in those programs is that they're all encompassing, and it fit a lot with what Bessel's talking about. But like the program in Mysore, he has them start by doing yoga, and then they do clay work, and then they do painting.
Yeah.
And this is all leading up to the Shakespeare work they're going to do. But it's physical, it's emotional, they do folk traditions. And I'm wondering, in working with PTSD and with the veterans, how you find the best balance between the different activities in order to really get at working with the trauma.
How do what? Say the last part again for me. Sorry.
How do you find the best balance in terms of all these different aspects, that some are physical, some are tactile, some are emotional, some may be intellectual? How do you experience that?
That's an excellent question, Sheila, and it's lovely to see you, by the way. Really at the base of this, it's not an apology. This is just fact. I'm an actor. When it comes down to it, I'm an actor. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not, there's all these things I'm not. I don't have the letters after my name. When I share this is my experience, and it's just mine,
right,
and from others. But I'll say this, that the greatest gifts for me in the room have been when has nothing to do with me. It's me getting the hell out of the way and just holding the room for people to figure out what they need and what they want, and to lose any agenda I have of them liking me, which is really challenging because I have a pathological need for people to like me, to be brilliant or stunning, or to have everyone have a deep catharsis every single night. That's a lot. I have a lot of agendas that I have to overcome. And I do that by just making sure that I'm taking care of my own stuff, that I'm on my spine, that my feet are grounded, that I'm breathing, that I'm there, that I'm softening my jaw. The mere mechanics of what I do as an actor on stage are partly or the foundations of how I hold the room. And then within that room, making sure that I'm just eliminating any possibility for someone to feel shame. And those things combined is so much work that I don't really have a lot of time or extra space to do anything else. And so as far as, also losing that agenda of the thinking that healing is linear, because this person's path, and I know you all know this, but I'm just saying it anyways for the room, that this person's is different than mine, and it's different than this person's. So this person might respond to clay work. This person responds to breath. That person hasn't found anything that they respond to yet. They're taking care of themselves, whatever it is. So the way I find balance is I just invite everything into the space and trust that people will go as far as they know they can recover from, and hold that space for them and not push anyone towards anything, not pull them anywhere. And because I'm not a therapist, I get to self-disclose deeply. I get to self-disclose a lot. I don't make it about me. I open each session with just a very brief share of my own. I borrow a lot from AA about what did I like about AA and what don't I like about it. So I love that at the beginning people share. What I don't like is it has become sort of kitschy. It's like, let me entertain you. Well, I'm not fucking there to be, sorry. I didn't go to AA to be entertained. I'm there because I'm miserable and I hate myself. So share so that I feel that this is a space to where if I share, I won't be judged. And so that's what I try to create, is a space of, hey, you can share honestly here. And remember that I would say that it's really, if they're in a room with you, trust that they're all artists, that this world has at every turn attempted to crush the art out of them, that they're just little kids. Every one of us are just little kids who want to create. And the world is just doesn't reward or reinforce that artistry. So it's not about us saying, well, are they this or are they that? It's just here, whatever you want, whatever you need. Painting. I don't know anything about painting. You want to paint, come in and paint. We do some writing prompts. I tell them, I'm like, if you want to bring crayons and color, honestly, I don't care. I'm not here to make you me. I'm here to create a space for you to let that little baby artist in you run free. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I'm sorry that I've got such a bad connection. So I hope, but I'm delighted to see you.
I am delighted to hear you. Yeah, I know it's a very generic response, but this is, you know, I do get asked these kinds of things like, well, what should I do? I do what you're passionate about. Let others see your passion, and then create a space for them to show you blips of their passion, reward it, reinforce it, love it, encourage it. And as it comes out, continue, let it grow, let it grow. We have a fair number that go, hey, it turns out that painting's my jam. It's like, right on. Let me connect you with some people, combat paper guys. Or, you know, I'm into dance. Great. Let me connect you to Roman Baca, who's a former Marine that has Exit 12 dance. We're not trying to keep a community insulated. We're trying to, you know, share with everyone. So yeah, there was another question.
Let's jump back to Kate.
Yeah.
Kenny has got a question.
Yeah. So Stephen, your show is just gorgeous, and thank you for sharing it with us. And you've started to answer it partially through this, but I'm curious about whether you began creating the show with your personal experience, or with the Shakespeare, or with the history of warfare, or where exactly did you start to pull all these elements together from?
Great question. Thank you. It started flat out as me search. I was trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. Flat out. That's it. I didn't know that I don't know what I can't say. Here's what I know. I knew that I had reached a point to where my coping mechanisms that I'd been using were not working as well anymore. Drinking a bottle of tequila every night was not serving me as well as it had. And it did. I'll just be honest. It did. Do I wish I'd gotten sober sooner? Sure. But, you know, I didn't. And I do know that, look, I'm 53, about to be 54. And statistically, I'm somewhat of an anomaly. That, you know, between being a veteran, where we have a higher addiction rate, higher homelessness rate, higher suicide rate, being the survivor of childhood molestation, being the child of an alcoholic, being the child of, and you just keep checking it. And statistically, the window that I should have lived to this age gets smaller and smaller. So what had happened was that I'd reached a point to where I knew something had to change, or I was going to go down. I was going to lose my wife. You know, in AA, they say I hit bottom. I saw it. I saw it coming in at near light speed. I'm like, let me go the other direction. So Cry Havoc was my way out, because that's what I know. That's what I'm comfortable with. That's what I love. It's what I'm most passionate about. It's what I felt had kept me alive to that point. I know that when I was in grad school and I was on stage, my shitty committee, as my wife calls it, right, with all the voices saying, you're not this, you're not that. Once I was implementing the true classical actor training of just ground, breathe, and listen. Then breathe in and respond with the line you've been given. Just that, stay in that moment. That takes so much. But I noticed that when I'm in the moment, my shitty committee has a lower volume, and sometimes are gone completely. I know that in grad school, a classmate of mine had and has Tourette's. But what we commiserated about was that when he was on stage, his Tourette's weren't there, or they were at least diminished. This is without medication. This is classical actor training, and he would lose his tics. So there is a magic, there is a medicine in this. So when everything was beginning to crumble, I went back to what I know worked, which was Shakespeare and theater. So I went, I'm going to go back. Cry Havoc was initially my graduate thesis. It was a much different version of it. But I went back to it and said, I'm going to go back, use that as a vehicle to try to answer what the hell is wrong with me. And as I asked, every day that I asked that and tried to be more honest about it, The result was Cry Havoc. Now to hop on, does that answer the question? Is that good? All right. Yeah. And someone had asked earlier, and Kurt, I think you kind of had earlier as well, about, well, what's it like to do it now, 9 years later? Now it's
traumatized.
Yeah. It was, make no mistake, it was re-traumatizing to do it every single night. It was. The medicine was having an audience and surviving it. Now, I don't necessarily always suggest that. Not everyone's different, so that I'm not saying everyone should do this. I think everyone should have a solo show, flat out. Just everyone should. What I do, whether you show it to bigger audience, I don't necessarily suggest it. People that you love, that are going to give you, that are only going to receive you with eyes of love. People that are going to go, no matter, if you go up and go, you have nothing, you lose every line, you go, never mind. And they go, oh no, that was brilliant and brave of you. Because it is. Think of this. Research in social psychology shows us that globally, human beings, by and large, consider speaking in public more terrifying than death.
Yeah.
That means it's a laboratory that we can use, but it also means that we are messing with people's lives when we put them on stage. So that has to be a choice that they choose to make. And if someone does, I don't care what they do. And I mean this literally. If they go up and literally doo-doo in their pants, we applaud them and go, you went up in front of people. You faced death. I stand in genuine awe of you. And know this, that when I did Cry Havoc, the very first 2 notes I got, my very first 2 notes were 1, someone else should do it, not me. And 2, it's not theater, it's more of a radio play, so it shouldn't be done, or it should be converted to a radio play. I've now done over 500 performances of it in 5 or 6 continents. There's no way I could know that. And that's not, I didn't go forward with it going, yeah, I'm going to show you. It was, I need to do this show. I need to do it. I've done it in environments where I thought these people are going to murder me. And for real, I was terrified to do it, but I thought I'm going to do it because there's 3 people out there that need to hear this. There's 3 people that need to know they're not alone. They need to know that they can survive their alcoholic parents. They need to know that they're not alone in their suicidal idealization. They need to know that they can actually make it, and that there's other people out there waiting with open arms for them. So Cry Havoc became, eventually, is now a piece to where it's a character. It's a part of my life to where I have to go back and become. I created a ritual at the beginning that allows me to do so, which someone asked about. So I'm going to segue into that. The train noises at the beginning.
Yeah, so that was the question that I had, that sound effect, how you came upon that, and does that ground you just to keep you going?
That is the sole purpose of it. The sole purpose, I went out in front and I had to make eye contact and be in this moment in order to go forward. Otherwise, I start off and I begin to perform, I begin to please, I begin to apologize, I begin to self-deprecate for humor, instead of just be present and accept no matter what you think of me. And to really be Hamlet. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It just is. And the way I did it was I got on there, and for me, just like the gesture of Marcus, whenever I remember that on the train, I remember, because it was chugging up the Rockies, it did this little motion, and it had a repetition of noise. So when I told the story and I did that, I noticed that whenever I tried to begin, if I wasn't present, it came out like, oh, yeah. I couldn't really do it because I was so nervous that I was way higher pitched. I wasn't breathing deeply, and I wasn't grounded. That meant I wasn't fully present. I know that when I make that train noise, I know that when I would revisit it, I would have an immediate intrusive thought, or dare I say flashback, and go back to the train. That's true to this day, just like the gesture with Marcus. However, the goal, for me at least, was to be there and be here, at least equally, to not be hijacked all the way back to my trauma. can I be here with you? And inviting that into the room. And that's where the healing comes in. That's where I begin to become the executive voice instead of my trauma. So I have done that opening bit as many as, I think Dawn counted the highest number as 20, because I just couldn't calm down. I was just, and I just couldn't. And so then I began literally just checking in with my own body, practicing what I preach in front of an audience. And I found that the audience accepted me with, I don't know how to phrase it. I'm going to use the term that's what's coming to mind. It's hard for me to say, but loved me more, accepted me more because of it. Because they know, we know, right? When we hear someone, we're like, they're making all the crying sounds, but I don't know you know what I mean? I don't know if I believe them. And I didn't, and if in the room with the veterans, I want them to be honest, to be open. And even if they're numb, to just say, I actually don't feel a damn thing. That's okay. Be in this circle with that. So for me to go up in front and expect you to believe me on this journey, I can't do it until I'm genuinely back on that train. So that became my landmark. And then we put it in throughout the play so that whenever I hit a really heavy spot, I had a landmark to come back to recover. And so did you as an audience to go, okay, we're safe. We're on the train. We're safe. We're safe. We're okay. We're at least safe, but not too safe, as psychology would put it, right? We're at least not in immediate danger. So yeah, that's. I hope that answered several questions that came up. Thank you.
So we're gonna start to segue into the end, and I want to invite Dawn to.
55 minutes already.
I
talk a lot.
You do, Stephan, and we're going to speak about this after we get off the air. Invite Dawn to come in, but as the prep into this. Stephan, I want to talk about you use it, you share it in your show, self-loathing.
Yeah.
Self-loathing. And since you have dealt with your PTSD and all those issues and your healing and has the self-loathing got less? Does it occur less? Or have you managed to eradicate it? Or when does it come up and how do you deal with it now?
I deal with it, essentially I deal with it every day, all day. So this idea that's why I say, and Bessel says it, and so does Carol Gilligan and James Gilligan and all my idols in healing, that it's not linear. It's definitely not linear. And it's similar to my back pain. Right, so they told me your life is now pain management. They didn't say you're going to recover. Your life is pain management. So that reframed for me my daily approach, my moment-to-moment approach, the same way that my sobriety did. Now, for me, my sobriety, I am not dogging AA. It was a wonderful start for me and for at least 15% of the population that it works for. It's working. So I want to applaud it. The fact that I can go to any city, find a meeting, and it's free and run roughly the same way, that's magical. And in fact, DE-CRUIT was modeled after that very template to aim for that. But what didn't help me was just saying, I have a disease, I have to deprive myself of this, and you just got to get over it, or you just got to deal with it. And if you drink, you're a piece of shit and you start at zero. Well, the problem was I already thought of myself as a piece of crap. When I joined the Army, people have heard me say this before. This is true. That when I joined the Army, I thought I was a piece of shit. And then for the first 2 weeks, they called us literally that. And I thought, I'm home. This is perfect. They get me. And then they built me up into something else. They took me, rebranded me, taught me how to breathe, walk, talk, dress, everything. So that's where DE-CRUIT came from, was can't we do this with something creative? Can't we do it through something healing, something more authentic instead of towards destruction of the military? So for me to get sober, it was less about getting sober and it was why, and it was this one right here mostly helping, of why do I want to drink? Well, I want to drink because I hate myself. Well, what, and I'm sorry, I'm saying why, but I didn't. Our question is, what do I feel? Where do I feel it in my body? When do I feel it? And when I get proficient at this, I ask, when is the earliest I've felt this? And for me, it went all the way back to trigger warning. I'm not going to be graphic. I'm just going to share my childhood experience. I was molested. I was molested by a family member for a couple of years, and which left me prey to a neighbor who also molested me for about a year and a half. So as a result, I blamed myself. I was 5 and 6 and 7. I blamed myself. I had this deep self-loathing because as a 5-year-old, I knew I shouldn't go into that room, and I went anyways. So I blamed myself. So when it came to getting sober, I realized I want to drink because I hate myself, but I hate myself because of a decision I made at 5. I would not give a drink of tequila to a 5-year-old. So why would I give it to myself? So this mechanism, if you will, is what I came up with to when I had the impulse to drink, to not drink, to go, yeah, I know. And I was nowhere near self-acceptance. We talked about this early on. You asked me, Kurt, before everyone got on here, when's the last time I saw Cry Havoc? It's been well over a year, way over a year, because I struggle with seeing my own image and with hearing my own voice. But Dawn, when I was getting sober, when I was about a few weeks sober, I had such self-loathing. I was punching a wall that had brick behind it, wood with brick, because self-harm is my other thing. I've drilled through my own thumb. I didn't realize that at the time, but causing self-harm. So we had this big mirror with love, but grabbed me, and I was saying all of these things about myself, really awful things. And normally she would, just let me take it through and give me love after. But she grabbed me, pulled me in front of the mirror and said, "It's not true. It's not true. Stand in front of this mirror until you can find one thing that you can love." And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. She's like, fine. Find one thing that you can accept. We're not leaving the mirror until you find one thing about you that you see in front of you that you can accept. You don't have to love it. Can you accept it? My eyebrows are dark, and that was it, if I'm not mistaken. She's like, okay, say it more in I like my eyebrows. I like my eyebrow, and work towards this. The way we get better at things is reward and reinforcement, and then we repeat it. That's how we form habits. So I cultivated my self-loathing. That shitty committee was created by people when I was a child. Many of them aren't even alive anymore. And yet I keep them in my life. Why? Because it became habit. So the idea is, let me rewire. This is a la Bessel van der Kolk, a la Pat Ogden, a la Carol Gilligan, everyone who's writing is saying, we're going to rewire that impulse. We're going to rewire that habit. So if I cultivated my self-loathing, can't I cultivate self-love? If you would ask me 7-8 years ago, self-love, there was no way. I'm like, that'll never happen. I would say that I do practice self-compassion. I'm not at love. I do still battle the self-loathing, but I wouldn't say that it's minute to minute to minute. It comes in. And I would also say that my suicidal idealization, only because of the last about 3 years, where I've actually had days in a row to where I didn't think of killing myself, was how I became aware that it was every moment of every day of my life. I didn't know that. I didn't know that my suicidal idealization wasn't a thing that pops in. It was a way of being, and that I had to rewire around that.
So part of this is a nice segue into Dawn. Such a beautiful sharing about her in your play, and that she's still with you. I mean, I'm speechless about that. I'm joking, but
actually, statistically, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you find it easier to love yourself when someone, Dawn, loved you? and stuck with you, right?
Yeah.
Was that part of the healing, that maybe if Dawn can love me,
Yes.
maybe I can find a way to love more of myself? Was that?
Yes. Maslow said his greatest regret is that when he created his hierarchy of needs, that he didn't put community on there. The community should have been a part of the hierarchy of needs. And that has been true for me, that the fact that someone that I, before we started dating, we were buds. Obviously I knew she was a knockout and an amazing actor, but we didn't think of each other that way. We both engaged about the relationships we were in, and boo-hooed the position that we placed ourselves in. But then, for someone to love me unconditionally, the thing that, she's responding to some of the texts there, or messages, so she's writing while I talk. But the fact that someone that I looked up to so much loved me, even I didn't have to be someone else. Something that we bonded over was that so many of the relationships we had been in were people who said, well, why aren't you that person at home? You're so loved, you're the life of the party here, but then when you come home, you're this depressed, ornery, disconnected human. And what I had for the first time in my life was someone that loved both equally. Even when I irritated her, she wasn't afraid to show her irritation, but didn't love me any less. She loved me and said, I'm irritated with you. We're going to deal with this, but it doesn't affect my love for you. I'm just irritated. And it encouraged me to do so. And this is what goes back to what I said early on with the amygdala, that along with, I have to say, one of the hardest parts of all of this, frankly, was was removing people from my life that kept a part of me that I no longer wanted to be a part of me. When I got sober, I lost several friends. One actually texted me and said, "Been nice knowing you," and meant it. And then as I go to this place of where I no longer I want to lose the self-deprecation, where I don't want to be in a toxic environment. The people that I put myself in those environments with some of these toxic directors and whatnot, when I no longer accepted that, they went away. So I had to create for myself a community of people who love me as much as I aspire to love myself. So I surrounded myself with that. And I want to, it might be a segue, but I just want to, it would be unethical for me that if I didn't, and I'm calling in rather than out. Thomas, it looked to me as though you may have had a reaction. And I want to give you space if you did, that if you want to share, you can, but you don't have to. And if I didn't see it correctly, I apologize. But I also, when I share all these things, that if you had an emotional response, I want to make sure I give space for it. No, okay, good. I'm happy to report that I missaw that. Yeah, what were you saying?
I just wanted to say he says in the show the one side of it, but what he doesn't say is what he did for me, and this isn't always possible. I went through many abusive relationships until I learned to cultivate a relationship with myself that was loving, and until I did that, I couldn't draw love into my life. And once I figured that out, I was alone for more than 2 years before I started a relationship with Stephan, because I was cultivating that with myself, which is why I was able to facilitate a little bit. But he did the same for me, in that in all of the trauma that I suffered as a child, because my understanding of PTSD was so civilian and limited, I had no comprehension at the time that could have anything to do with me, because I didn't serve. So at the time, I just didn't think that I deserved to have any of that healing. And Stephan was the first person to suggest to me that the things that happened to me in my childhood could have long lasting effects and be still affecting what I was doing, and that I could have PTSD even though I was a civilian. And that went a long way to cultivating healing. So we were mirrors for each other, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it is. And I will still suggest that even when you have a loving relationship, there's many of the work that I did and the work that Stephan did, it is alone. Even with a relationship, there's just a lot of it is for yourself. I can't, the self-harm and the self-harm that came from self-loathing comes in different many forms. Like people look for cutting and they look for the dramatic side, of suicide, and they miss all these other things. The way that he was running was self-harm. The way that he was brushing his teeth was self-harm. The way that he was washing himself with a washcloth was self-harm. The way there's many things and conversely for me too, that is what's so useful about having a partner who can see those things and point those things out
in a loving way.
Lovingly, yes, with eyes of love, always.
Because it matters. If she had said, what the hell are you doing with your toothbrush? Right, I would have had my usual response. Rah, 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 rah. But instead, it was she observed it, and like we do in theater, said, I don't recall exactly, but in a loving, as she just said, eyes of love. Said, that's actually, yeah.
It's just the point is the observation without judgment. And all of so many of the veterans say, that we're always told to take care of ourselves, but nobody tells us how.
Yes.
I've got a kid. I got this job. Yeah. I got this. What is it? Everyone talks about self-care, but nobody tells you how. And so really in DE-CRUIT, all we tried to do was make a ritual by getting veterans in the room and talking to the population that we wanted to serve and say, okay, well, what helps cultivate the space where you can be kind to yourself?
Yes.
And that ritual is what helps even begin to create a space where you can look at those things without judgment, so that you yourself, and in my case, myself, can start looking at them and going, well, what is working for me and what didn't, and start. That's really what starts the process of the observation of self-loathing and what lessens.
It's all shame.
Increases self-efficacy.
I wanted to hop on one thing. There was some, I was trying to find it, but someone asked about the D. We say PTS instead of PTSD. I used to be much more sensitive about it. And I don't know what changed for me, but the post-traumatic stress disorder, it's just that we say PTS, because when we're in the circle, we're trying to create a shame-free circle. So any way that might creep in, we just eliminate it. So having a disorder tends to generate some shame. So it's gone. The construct of time, it's gone. You show up, if you can get, I know when I curl up on the couch, it's real. I've become Isaac Newton's law. I'm an immovable object, and it's really difficult to get me moving again when I'm in that depression. So if someone shows up, the fact that I have an idea of what they had to go through just to get there, I don't care if it's on Zoom or in the room, that alone deserves reward and reinforcement, love, affection, applause, whatever they need. And I don't care when it is. I don't care if there's a minute left. I don't care if they show up, 20 minutes late and leave 20 minutes early. The fact that they carved out time for themselves, the fact that they carved out time to support others, we reward it. So anything that might generate shame, and it's a ongoing learning process, we eliminate, so that we're like, hi, welcome. You made it. You made it. Our first thing that we say on day one is congratulations. You lived to this age. That deserves love and applause. And whatever you're doing, keep it. We're not here to judge you and say you got to stop using or you got to stop. We're just saying that you're here. That means you might be ready to try some new stuff. You might be ready to put some new tools in your toolbox, as it metaphorically speaking. So
I think that's a perfect place to come to conclusion. Thank you, Stephan, and thank you, Dawn. You're a beautiful couple. You're beautiful colleagues. You're beautiful individual human beings, and the work that you do is so important, and the passion that you bring to it, and the fact that you continue to do that is miraculous. And for all of those who have been touched by you and mentored by you, thank you. I'm one of them. So you teach me every time we're together. I learn something about myself and about the work. So to the rest of you, thank you all for coming and participating. Bessel's name came up quite a bit in this. We just recorded him this week, and so he'll drop next month. Look for his presentation and read his book in advance. It's the best book on trauma that I've read in forever. And stay in touch with what's going to happen after our little two-week hiatus for the Christmas break. We're going to come back strong, and we hope to see you. And if you have ideas about doing something, sharing something, let us know. This is the conference that will never end. I'm just going to keep on.
Good, because you deserve it. We just want to say thank you all, everyone on here, and everyone who will view this, for the work that you're doing. We need you. We need to grow this community, and it's because of you that so many people are being helped, and we need to teach one to teach one.
Yeah.
And thank you all for that.
Possible.
I'm going to kick it back to Scott. You have anything? What's coming up next week, Scott?
Yeah. Dawn, Stephan, thank you for being here. The work you're doing is groundbreaking. It is passion filled. It's a personal journey that is just inspiring to watch. So thank you for sharing that with us today. So thank you all for joining us here today. We love you. We hope to see you again next Friday.